everybody. This is Gabe Estel. Welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo, episode number 106. I'm here with my co-hosts Jonathan Getz and Dennis Levi Leach. How's it going, fellas?
Amazing.
Cheers.
Glad to hear it. Hope everybody's staying healthy and safe. I'm here at my cabin in the woods here.
You're
Just
hiding
kidding.
out, man.
Right, I am. It is. It's
we cannot disclose this.
This is Ron Swanson.
No, this is an undisclosed location. Please don't tell anyone. But the Wi-Fi signal's still working, so I'm with you, folks. Tonight, we're going to continue our marathon episode that started back in 2016. Just kidding, but it was quite a while back.
September of 19.
Yes. Of the 100 things that we're grateful for in baseball and music. So we're gonna continue with that tonight, and also actually it's probably a good time to get going with this topic since we don't have any baseball and we don't have any live music right now. The two cornerstones of this podcast people cannot experience right now. So hey, I don't feel bad about keeping the countdown rolling, and thanks for hanging with us.
I'll drag this along if I have to.
That's right. So we're going to continue tonight. We're like in our 30s, I believe, with these entries, and I hope you're having fun with them. I want to remind everybody before we jump in, you can get everything Rock and Roll Shin-Soo at rockchew.com, and also you can follow us on the Twitter and the Instagram at rockinchew, right? That's in as in you will never know my location. It's best I can do. And then also like us on Facebook, and you can consume this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast apps. But yeah, just go to rockchew.com and you can get it'll take you where you need to go. All right. Anyway, so who wants to start, guys, tonight?
You can start,
Anybody?
Gaber.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This one I kind of a lot of these, considering I wrote this list when the world was a very different place. So I've kind of like been going back over some of these entries and kind of, sort of molding them a little more to my liking.
Yeah. I've done that on a couple.
I'm like, what was I thinking? Yeah, good for you. Good for you. You're the purest of the bunch. That's right. Well, on mine, I realized mine were similar. So I was like, well, those are kind of similar things. So like, I was like, I'll try to change it. But yeah. And a couple of them, as I mentioned, like I changed my mind. I'm like, well, I got to thinking about this. I'm like, I don't know if I am that grateful for it, or I'm grateful for a different aspect of it. But anyway, this one could probably go off on a couple different tangents, but I'll see where it takes us. I had originally put in the erosion of guilty pleasures, right, as the entry. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The term guilty pleasure is often applied, as we know, to a behavior, or in the context of entertainment, some form of popular entertainment, whether it's, a movie that's so bad that you like it, or so bad it's good, or a song or album or band or whatever. And I see some of that fading away, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think part of this phenomenon of the erosion of guilty pleasures centers around availability, right? Mm-hmm. We can queue up any tune we want, right? I mean, we're living in an age of, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in one of my other entries, the consumer has won, guys. Let's put it that way. I mean, for better or worse, like, if you're a fan of something, you've got it fucking made right now. I mean, you can pull up any music video you want. You can listen to any song you want. If you don't have the subscription, you can find it somewhere else, right?
Same thing with
that
movies,
episode of
TV shows.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It used to be like, well, remember that one episode of The Golden Girls where they did this, and you're like, here it is, right? Like,
video games.
So
any video
games.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Etc. Right. So you can queue up any tune, including a guilty pleasure, right? So prior to the advent of streaming, or at least iTunes, where you had to pay $1 for it, right? So you can make $1 investment in that song that you don't want to tell anybody you like. Guilty pleasures, prior to the advent of streaming in iTunes, right? But streaming even more so now. Guilty pleasures were guilty pleasures because we couldn't indulge in those pleasures very often, right? I mean, you'd hear the tune on the radio and you'd be like, oh, yeah, I don't want to tell anybody I love this, but I'm going to crank it up, right? Mm-hmm. Like Cough, Roll with the Changes, REO Speedwagon, right? Which I start every run with. Before I get into a podcast I'm listening to, I start every run with Roll with the Changes. So you know that about me, right? Anytime it's my favorite workout song. So, you heard the tune on the radio, or maybe you heard it at a wedding reception, or like a holiday party, or a school dance back in the day. So now you can scratch your guilty pleasure itch anytime you like, right? So therefore, kind of like, is it even a guilty pleasure anymore? Do guilty pleasures even exist, right? I mean, you don't often hear the word guilty pleasure anymore because there are avenues right now that tailor to our guilty pleasures, right? There are one-hit wonder radio stations, right? I mean, you can listen to on Pandora or Sirius or whatever, right? I mean, you can have that station. Mm-hmm. Also, movies that are so bad they're good, right? I used to feel like that was like a straight to video thing. Now it's part of the lexicon, like the movie The Room, that everybody's like, oh, this movie's so shitty, it's brilliant,
Sharknado. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Campy, right? Kitsch, camp, irony, right? It's all in.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the culture of irony, right? And it's been going on for a while now. It's not going to stop anytime soon. So you don't really have these guilty pleasures that much anymore. Here's why I think it's an okay thing, right? Or it's a good thing, I should say. I know I'm getting old when I begin a sentence with kids today, but kids today, right? They've got the ability to make music that other generations didn't have that opportunity, right? Like, will they? Probably not. But like with streaming, a kid today, like in his or her bedroom, right? They've basically got a virtual library card that the three of us didn't have, right? Mm-hmm. Like we had to discover the tune on the radio. We had to hear it on MTV. Then we had to go and buy it, right? Which you could argue on the other end of the spectrum, that was more meaningful. That was a better time. And I don't disagree with those arguments necessarily. But I'm just talking about the other side of the coin here. I'm hopeful, because I believe that there is a lot of genre bending going on right now in popular music. And that's not to say I like all new pop music or even listen to it that often. But I will say I'm fascinated by it. And I find some of it really adventurous, right? Like, pop music is much weirder than it was 20 years ago when you had like NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears and, like what we consider quote unquote pop music. It's much weirder and darker and lo-fi now that and I don't like all of it, but I find it fascinating. And I find it fascinating that it's popular. So there's got to be some kids out there with a Spotify account or a YouTube channel, which pretty much every kid has that I'm hopeful, because I think those kids are going to produce some music that doesn't speak to guilty pleasures and that blends all of these different types of things. I mean, there's going to be some kids out there that are like, yeah, we're going to start a band and our influences are Hall & Oates, Slayer, and Migos, right? And that's okay. That's good. That gives me hope. We don't know if it can't be done because we haven't heard it yet. So I know I started with the erosion of guilty pleasures, and maybe this wasn't quite a linear path to where I'm going now, but I hope you guys see where I'm going. That I think this erosion of guilty pleasures is a good thing. And I think that guilty pleasures are going to become a thing of the past because we've got the opportunity to indulge them and do a lot of different things with them. So That's my point.
Right on. Yeah,
Very
I appreciate
nice,
that.
Yeah, I had to explain to my 7-year-old daughter that there was a time where there was basically one channel that showed movies, and it was called HBO, and you didn't get to pick what you watched. It was whatever they were showing at that time of the day.
So you had to enjoy
right.
She's just like, yeah.
But
Kids today are so.
Susanna, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they've never experienced a world where what they want, whether music or movies or TV, just isn't at their fingertips. So to them, it's like complete. It's like saying the sky is purple or whatever. They're like, huh? They're like, you couldn't just watch whatever you wanted, or listen to whatever song you wanted to listen to right this second. Because my daughter does that now. She has like favorite little Disney songs or whatever, and she'd pull them up right on the tablet. Boom, I want to hear it. Here it is. Boom. And to try to think that our lives were totally different than that, makes me think I'm really old, but we're not that old, which is the crazy thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How much will it change? Like you said, it is eroding. But partially, I think part of it is the guilty pleasures are changing. They're evolving.
Yeah.
As well. You know?
Right.
Whereas
people aren't embarrassed about them anymore.
True.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. And with Susanna, I mean, she'll always have there'll always be new music that you're not into that she'll probably like, no matter how much you try to influence her and be like, oh, here's these Nick Drake records I want you to listen to. You know, I mean, I don't know, maybe that might not be a good idea for a teenager. She'll become instant emo, basically. But you know, she'll discover things that you had to hear from a friend. Or you had to hear from me or Jonathan, or you had to hear from, you know what I mean? Or some, whatever. You had to find it in a record store, and she won't have to do that, which kind of makes me hopeful, because she might come home one day and be like, Dad, have you heard the Commodores? They're fucking amazing. You know what I mean? You'll be like, yeah, they are, you know. How do you know
pull the
that?
Commodore section of my vinyl out and be like, here.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hopeful. I mean, there's going to be so much more genre bending, and I mean, I've probably overused that term already, but it's I don't know. It's I think it's going to go to some interesting places, really, and all of the availability of music is you know, don't get me wrong. I'll say all the counter arguments. You know, it's the artists don't get paid as much as they used to, and that sucks, and I hate that. But it's opening up a lot of avenues for people to get exposed to so much music, and to put their music out there as well. It's like anybody can get a SoundCloud account, you know. That it's going to go in some really interesting places, and I'm kind of even a little excited about it.
Yeah, I think that you touched upon it. The next big step is living in a post-irony world where
there you go.
It's no longer, you know, we can rock the Seals and Croft because it's fun, but in an ironic sort of way. But just appreciating the songcraft for what it is, even though it might include elements that you aren't used to listening to. And, you know, if you're listening to Nine Inch Nails the other 8 hours out of the day, but still not being ashamed. Of understanding what it takes to appreciate both. And once, I think that now these music producers, you know, in their homes or living rooms or bedrooms or whatever, start to produce this music in a post-irony world, then the true genuine nature starts to shine, and we're all the richer for it.
Yeah, I agree. And if I could, to piggyback on what you're saying, if I could put one more point on it, I'm hopeful, because you gave that Seals and Croft example, and people are can appreciate it in a different way. You know, it's not just a AM Gold tune, you know. I'm hopeful that some of the labels will start to fade. I don't like the term 80s music, because I think it devalues the music, you know, a little bit. I like the genre. I mean, I should say, I'm sorry. I like the decade, and I appreciate the '80s much more than I used to with music. And I think Eddie Trunk was talking about this a little bit, and he often says it about hair metal, how he doesn't like the term, because he feels like it's making fun of the music.
It's judging it.
Yeah, right. And I get that too with '80s a little bit, And the example that I use, one of my favorite albums in recent years is "Play Deep" by The Outfield, right? And to a lot of people, like, oh, that's good for an '80s record. You know what I mean? And it's like, no. It's just it's a great record. So I hope we start to reconsider some of those labels, and in a few years they won't kind of have a negative connotation attached to them.
Yeah, we're getting there, man. This is all still so young, this whole music thing. That's what's exciting. And that, yeah, I'm stoked about it. Like where it can go.
So I know I don't sound like the old fart that I did a few years ago, because I'm just, I don't know, I'm kind of hopeful on where things are going to head. I think there's some interesting things going on. They won't maybe have like the impact, you might not necessarily, like when we were growing up and prior to us, have all these rock bands headlining arenas. It may not look like that, but its success is going to look a little bit different, in terms of sales and reach and influence and things like that. But there's going to be a lot of branches on that tree,
Looking forward to it. Good one.
Well, it's a really good segue into my first one, which Gabe was talking about how we had to consume music in our day. And one of the ways was we had to go to a store and physically walk in and pick up the music and take it to a register and buy it. And my junior and senior year of high school, we started this thing where I believe it was on release day back then was Tuesdays?
Tuesdays, yeah.
Back then,
it used to be on Tuesdays.
Back then, it only changed like 3 years ago.
Okay.
Well, if you think about it, Tuesdays is pretty stupid for a release day.
It is.
It's mainly Fridays. It's just kind of Fridays now.
Right?
I guess it's
mostly Fridays.
Yeah.
Mostly Fridays.
Yeah. And so on Tuesdays, we would skip our lunch at school. We would skip school and fly down Route 4 to Best Buy to see the new releases. And, I wouldn't always buy anything, but one of us usually always did. And it was just one of those experiences where I'll never forget it because, you were skipping school and then you got to go to a store and hold the music and look at it and everything. And then in the mid 90s, late 90s, this would have been 98 to 97 to 99 basically would have been the period. There weren't gobs of winners as far as studio records during that period. I can remember one of my strikeouts was I was really hyped for the Eric Clapton Pilgrim record that came out, and it fucking sucked.
That makes one of us.
That's when it kind of turned.
Yeah. And then the big hit off that song was In My Father's Eyes. I was like, yeah. But we were just me and my buddy Ben were just buying it.
If his father heard that song, I'd hope he'd be disappointed in him. Anyway, go on.
I mean, we were just buying it.
We're never getting Clapton now, Gabe.
And that was just it was that age where we couldn't preview the album. We had no freaking clue what it was going to sound like. You know what I mean?
It was going to be From the Cradle Part 2. Yeah.
Right.
So, and then I remember we did when By Your Side came out, man. And while at the time I liked By Your Side some,
sure,
it was a little bit of a disappointment, as well.
Yeah.
And then
we could do a whole episode on that shit.
Don't get us started, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I was going to ask if you guys have any experiences kind of doing that, but you guys are probably kind of too far from Springfield to try to skip school and get to Best Buy and back in an hour.
Yeah, it would have been difficult. Yeah, I've got similar examples. I mean, By Your Side, you just mentioned, is one of them.
We could just
By Your Side.
I was going to say, we'll just go straight to new releases that you guys got that you were disappointed in then. We could.
I've described By Your Side before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Levi, I've described By Your Side before as the Phantom Menace effect. You were so jazzed because a new Star Wars movie came out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then about the third time you watched it, you're like, okay. That was how I felt about By Your Side. My favorite band releases an album, their first in about 4 years, at like the apex of my fandom for them, and then it turns out to be basically, it sounds like scraps from Aerosmith's 9 Lives that they left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. Yeah, the coke ran out about halfway through that record. You can hear it. Yeah, Jonathan, do you remember any specific like purchases back in the day where you were like, huh? After you got home?
Yes, it was Mirage Float Away with the Friday Night Gods.
Yeah, I have that album as well. Yeah.
Mirage discography before that album and after that album is wonderful.
Yeah.
That album in particular, produced by no less than Bruce Springsteen, is garbage. They got too cute. They just got a little too cute. Maybe I'll revisit it. But and see if it's still.
No, I remember when I got into Mirage and I got like their whole discography. I went to put that one on and it was just like, huh?
Well, and that scared me off of them. And then several years later, I spun the few albums that they released after that, and they're all great. They're all great albums after that. They're all. I mean, I'm not going to say they're all Kids in Philly, but they're all very, very good albums.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. Yeah, we couldn't. I didn't, have the balls to skip school, certainly, to go in on release day. So I would have them brought to me. Like Anthony Potter, I remember bringing me Vitology when Pearl Jam's Vitology was released. Like I remember him handing it to me at my front door, and although I did already have the vinyl because that vinyl was released 2 weeks earlier, but it was a treat nonetheless. On release day, even if you couldn't make it to the store.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it was always a really good time. That was just one thing I always loved about music and everything, was the ability to just discover things like that. And like I said, we were in such an age where you couldn't preview anything really. Like they had, like I mentioned in one of the past episodes, like Sam Goody in some of those places had the little wall where you could like throw some headphones on and hear like a clip of a song.
Mm-hmm.
But like there was no way to preview whole albums. Like you could listen to someone's whole record before you even decide to stream it or pay for it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah, there's no surprise factor, that's for sure.
I mean, you would have the single obviously leading up to the release.
Yeah, right.
Which you would hope to catch on the radio. But maybe that could be a thing. Yeah. Yeah. The first time hearing a new single. But yeah. Anyway, well, no, that's good. That's good.
Now bands, like, they can't really keep the lid on anything like they used to. I mean, it either gets out, or just the way the machine works now, they fucking got to put the whole thing. They'll have they'll put it on NPR for a week before it gets released in stores or on Pitchfork or Consequence of Sound or something.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Yeah, I cut you off, Getz. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, I think you're right, but at the same time, you do get bands who just drop albums out of nowhere with no pretense, with no announcement ahead of time, and that's kind of fun too. But I do like the lead up to the release.
Yeah,
I like the waiting.
Well, and I just the way albums were built up. When we were of age to buy records then, at the stores in our high school days, like you said, they would drop a single, then you might see a promo clip on MTV or VH1.
Right.
They might start, then you might start hearing some interview clips on the radio or something. And then it was like it all hyped you up to get into the album.
Whereas Kurt Loder nowadays, hyping people,
Yeah, like nowadays it seems like that's just gone. I
It
mean,
is.
they attempt to do
The
it with like
the
YouTube
promotional machine's
videos
just
and
not
stuff,
there.
but yeah.
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 I mean, I could tell
Well, and
you.
also, yeah.
I could name, exact release dates throughout my teens for some of my favorite records, but I couldn't name you one release date since I turned 19.
Right? Yeah.
Well, Levi, on that note, Levi, I mean, now the sort of one of the promotional trends is to drop the album unannounced. Right. I mean, that's kind of the new way to generate any promotional buzz, since all those old avenues that you were just talking about are dead. All of a sudden you'll read like, Beyonce drops an album unannounced. You almost kind of, to sort of capture the attention, you've kind of got to do that now.
Yeah, it's the anti-press release. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Strange.
Good one.
Right on.
Well, I will shift over to baseball, and so one of my favorite childhood memories is sitting in the kitchen on a Sunday morning while my parents made brunch, and I would pore over the Sunday newspaper sports section's full roster of baseball stats, speckled with bacon grease as it sizzled on the nearby griddle. Of course, the Sunday section wasn't just the top 10 leaders in home runs and ERA. Rather, this was a page devoted entirely to the stats of all qualified batters and pitchers, separated between the American and National Leagues. Gabe, is that you typing? Okay. Sorry.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Go on. I'm listening. I swear.
It was getting a little drum circulation.
Sorry. Sometimes forget that. Anyway. I'll put myself on mute. I'll put myself on mute while you are speaking. Go.
That's cool. Thanks. So batters were, I think they were sorted by batting average, and then pitchers were sorted by ERA, I think. But it's funny because 11-year-old brains are, very strange and formative, and you could comb through the stats, but you could also just kind of stare at the entire page and absorb it all just by osmosis, and you could recall it later to entertain yourself while just like daydreaming in American history class. So there were a few routes you could take when reading these stats. Personally, I'd first note how many batters from the Red Sox were in the top 10 or 20, Boston being my favorite team at the time. Wade Boggs, staple in the top 5, of course. On the pitcher's side, I'd check how far Roger Clemens' strikeout total was ahead of the other top pitchers in the leagues, usually far, far ahead. Early in the season, I'd look for those hitters who started hot and broke into double digits in home runs and RBI, because I didn't consider a season officially underway until a player made it to 10 home runs. You needed double digits. So in the middle of the season, I'd cross-reference the leading all-star vote getters with these stats to look for any injustices. Late in the season, I'd always look for the statistical extremist that was Rob Deere, down at the bottom of the list of batters, sorted by batting average, but usually with more than 20 or 25 dingers. And this is what got me through the junior high school day. And this is what started this was the start of a long love affair with baseball stats that would evolve into my devotion to podcasts like Effectively Wild, which I listen to a few times a week today. So yeah, the Sunday sports section's full roster of baseball stats. That's one of my favorite things.
Oh yeah, that's awesome, dude. I remember those, man. Back when the newspaper was worth getting.
Yeah, sure. It's fish wrapping now, but
yeah. Nowadays in Springfield, it's like 8 pages or something. It's
can they even afford to run those stats even anymore? Right? I don't know.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive, because not only would they have like that with the baseball, you could find like, all the boxing stats, and like they'd have horse racing like breakdowns, and like the sports section was like its own newspaper. It was like thick.
Yeah,
man. Those were the heydays. I missed that era, for sure.
I always liked the journal, the font that the Journal Register used for the standings as well. It might be kind of a universal font. I mean, you know more about fonts than me gets, but But it was a good font. It was a little different. Reminds me of my grandparents, because I'd always pour over the stats with my grandpa. But yeah, it was a rich time.
Again, in the age where you couldn't just hop online and pull up Baseball Reference.
Right.
These damn kids nowadays, they got it so easy.
Yeah. Now I check the I can choose the font I want for my standings.
Right. And see how Rob Deere, fared against left-handers at 1:26 p.m. every other Saturday.
Only in American League stadiums, right?
Yeah, right. I would like to know Rob Deere's exit velocity. That's for sure.
God, you guys are gonna have me looking up Rob Deere interviews all night. He's still alive, I gotta. Yeah, shit, that's the get. Yeah. God, we need to get him. Get Deere. Deere, if you're listening, get on this show.
I think he's in Tiger King or something. I don't know.
I want to come up with an all animal team names, of players, right? Like Lance Bass, right? Sure. Mike Trout, Rob Deere. Anyway,
Tim Salmon.
Maybe the list isn't as long as I'd like it to be, but anyway.
I'll think on it.
Good deal.
Jimmy Fox.
Right.
The Panda Bear. What's his name? The third baseman for the Giants. Yeah.
Oh, Sandoval.
Yeah. Oh, that's just a nickname, I guess. But
yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, your turn, Gabe.
Okay. Oh, back to me. All right. Up until about 4 or 5 years ago, I had lost some interest in the acoustic guitar. That isn't to say that classic rock songs that used it I don't cherish, or how some of my favorite bands were using it. That I didn't like still, but I had started to lose interest in kind of just how it sounded and that whole singer-songwriter thing. It all just started to blend together into some shitty Jack Johnson soup to me, I just, and don't even get me started on a mandolin, save a Steve Earle number or REM song or an old Rod Stewart tune. I could do without a mandolin, right? And I like, just as I've said before, I have no desire in hearing Eddie Vedder play a fucking ukulele. All right, I love Pearl Jam; they're one of my favorite bands, but I ain't into it yet. All right,
you're plug this shit in.
Yes. Then I started to. I think two things happened. I heard John Martin. Who, as I've talked about on this show, I pretty much have a perpetual boner for John Martin's music, right? I think he's amazing. I think you guys maybe heard it before I mentioned it, but it seems like you guys had recognized how great Thin Air is, or Solid Air, excuse me.
You
Thin Air, I was thinking of Pearl Jam. Anyway, yeah.
On the brain.
It blows.
This is a good acoustic song, by the way. Thin Air.
Yes. So I heard that, right? You're saying Thin Air? Yes.
Yeah.
I heard that, and then that obviously. I heard him probably about 10 years ago, and that started to get me into the British kind of folk stuff. Beyond Nick Drake. Started hearing John Rimborn and Bert Jansch and. Mm-hmm. All those cats. And then a few years after I heard John Martin, I heard Riley Walker. And, immediately I was like, oh, well, this guy sounds a lot like John Martin. And there now is kind of this revival of that kind of British folk sound that I really, really like. And it's not always folky. The guys are there's a lot of young guitarists right now that are doing really, really great stuff with the acoustic guitar. And it's not in the singer-songwriter vein. It doesn't sound like Jack Johnson or Ben Harper's acoustic stuff, which I like Ben Harper, but put him in an acoustic guitar, and I tune out. I'm talking about like Riley Walker, William Tyler, who's great. There's Steve Gunn, you know, these guys play electric too some, you know, so I'm not, but like, you know, they kind of made their mark with acoustic guitars and have since evolved. They were certainly, you can tell all of them are influenced by the British folk people that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. James Blackshaw, Charles Rumback. There's another cat named Trevor Gordon Hall that's really good. William Tyler really stands out to me the most among all those I mentioned. So I feel like there's some young guitarists. You know, most of the people that I mentioned are under 40, and they're really just doing some really great stuff with an instrument that I had kind of written off. You know, so that's my interest. I think they're just doing really, really great stuff. And I can't wait to hear what they're all going to do next. So, yeah.
New folk.
That's it. Yeah, new folk. Exactly.
Folk.
Yeah,
who knew Gabe at one time was Bluto from Animal House? It's like
Oh, good reference. Yeah, I can't top that one. But and I guess you guys know what I'm saying. Just like I just felt like, you know, singer-songwriter thing, kind of acoustic guitar, kind of run its course. Like it all just
for
sounded.
Sure, I agree with you. Like there was, like you said, there was that period where it was like Jack Johnson and Ben Harper and stuff, and then it just like those guys kind of faded away, and then it just started, everything like you said started kind of sound the same with other people. Yeah, and so I have one of those. I have the Steve Gunn record, the gentleman you mentioned, and it's excellent. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's like, it's not Way Out West, but it's because that's Marty Stewart,
right?
It's something like that though.
But I know what you're
excellent. Talking about. I was very very pleased with it. The name of that record is Way Out Weather.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. And you know, and Gunn can play, like, he plays a mean electric guitar too. You know, it's he's great. And you know, an older cat, older than all those cats that we just mentioned. You know, Tim Reynolds as well. Like I've really, you know, you know, sometimes when people think, oh, Tim Reynolds, Dave Matthews is the other piece of that. But I really dig all of Tim Reynolds' solo stuff. You know, and that's like, to me, that's like hearing a Steve Howe acolyte, you know, listening to Tim Reynolds. To me,
oh yeah, Tim Reynolds is a freaking master of acoustic guitar.
The one, as I mentioned, the one that really stands out to me is I really, really like William Tyler. I think what he's doing is he's playing the acoustic guitar like I've never heard anybody play it, or people haven't played it like that in a long time, or he's just, he really stands out.
I listened to his Third Man Records recording live at the Third Man Studios a couple weeks ago. Yeah, it's very good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Check it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Riley Walker is a pretty funny Instagram, Twitter personality too. Yeah. If you
right on.
If you this is I mean I think this is like he's recently gotten sober. So, you know, just, I don't know, new perspective when you get sober, you know, and, you know, he's pretty funny. And he's like, here's a picture of me, next to, and it was, he like played like a British folk festival or something like 10 years ago, you know? And, he's like, here's a picture of me next to it. It was Nick Drake's mom's grave. He's like and her emo son. She's like, and it's just like, I'm sure the guy likes it, Greg. It was just funny the way he phrased it. He also like had a story on there, like that same trip to England, like he Donovan was headlining, I guess, the festival that he played. And like he stole all of Donovan's beer, I guess. And like Donovan's grandson is like Donovan's manager or person now. That,
Tour manager.
Yeah, and like Donovan's like grandson wanted to kick his ass. He's funny. Riley Walker's funny. He's like, it shows like one more. He was like, it showed him picture of him getting a manicure. This is like when you could get a manicure a couple months ago. He's like, getting the nails done so I can pick the guitar for you fucking simpletons. He's just his sobriety has brought out his sense of humor even more. And it's just, he's a fun follow. I recommend following Riley Walker on Twitter and then Instagram.
All right.
Yeah. Nice. And that kid can play too. He tears it up. His Primrose Green is one of my favorite records of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna take it over back to baseball. One of the things that I'm definitely most grateful for in my life was the 1989 Chicago Cubs. We've talked about them before on this podcast a million times in other episodes, whether it was Rookie of the Year, Jerome Walton, or whatnot. But the 89 Cubs were the apex of. I remember 84 when the Cubs went to the division championship because I was dude, I was so little. I would have been 3 or 4 years old when that happened.
And you recall it? Wow.
Because I remember grown adults crying.
They lost to the Padres,
and I think when you're a kid and you see like a room of like 50 or 100 grown adults start sobbing, you always will remember it.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a loss to San Diego, right,
quick.
Levi?
Yeah.
Levi. They lost to the Padres, right?
Yes, it was to the Padres, and not just one loss. They were up, like 3 games to none or something, and then lost them all in a row.
Well, not 3-0 because that had never happened until the Yankees.
Because they were, But it was, so I can remember that. I mean, do I remember every play of the game or anything? No. But like, I can remember the 84 Cubs. I can remember being hyped about them. And then I remember it all crashing down. And so by 1989, I was 8. So I was, a lot more aware and, into baseball at that point. I had collected cards for 2 or 3 years at least by that point. And so they were my team, man. It was like, I remember going to B&J Coin Shop and buying the 89 Topps Cubs team set back when they would sell them there. Like, they would like hand collate the set, you know what I mean? And then put it in a little baggie. Mm-hmm. And it was just, they called them the Boys of Zimmer back then. Yeah. And they were just a great team. And it was just one of those things where it was my first like love of baseball was the 89 Cubs.
They were, Levi, when you consider them, when you compare them to the Giants, who they lost to, were they pretty evenly matched with the Giants? I would say they were, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say they were pretty, what Will Clark ended up being, I think, the Cub killer in that series. But
Giants would have had Kevin Mitchell, right? Rick Rochelle, right? I don't know wwho else like would have been in the Giants field though, right?
Yeah,
like
pull them up.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to see if I can name them without Mitchell and Clark. Mitchell and Clark are the only people that like stand out to me on the 89 Giants, who ended up losing to the A's.
Right.
Rick Rochelle, right?
Robbie Thompson, Candy Maldonado.
Maldonado, yeah. Pat Sheridan, Jim Weaver.
Yeah. Kevin Mitchell was far and ahead. Between him and Will Clark.
Clark and Mitchell are like the big names, though. Yeah. I mean, all those other guys, they might have been contributors and had some good seasons, but like,
yeah.
Right?
Ernie Riles was the next best
Matt
player.
Williams would have been on that team too.
Okay, young Matt Williams.
Yeah, he was a
reserve. Been near the beginning of his career.
Jose Bay.
So like, not a ton of like.
They were known for their pitching superstars. The pitching, it was like Steve Bedrosian, Jeff Brantley, Dave Dravecky, Goose Gossage, Rick Rochelle, as you mentioned. It was all about pitching, I think, with them.
Okay. Yeah.
And the Cubs won one more game than the Giants did in that regular season, I believe. And yeah, the Giants won 92 games. The Cubs won 93 games.
So Levi, let me see if I can, as a non-Cubs fan, name the starting lineup from that year, the Cubs, without
I will give
looking
you
at it.
$400 if you do it.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. All right, I'll start. I swear I do not have any
And you don't have to
open
put it in
right
order.
now.
Yeah.
Okay. First base, Mark Grace, right?
Yeah.
Second base, Rhino, obviously.
Yep.
Shortstop, you've got Dunston.
Yep.
Third base, Vance Law.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yep.
Am I right? Okay.
I'm sweating.
Center field, you got Dwight Smith.
Nope.
No, but just name the
No?
outfielders. Just name the outfielders.
Yeah, you
don't
don't,
have to get
got to name
Jerome
the
Walton.
specific.
Jerome
Walton.
Walt. Dwight
And
Smith
then-
playing yet?
No, he was there. He was left.
Okay, sorry. So
Jerome
okay, I can name the
Walton.
outfielders. Yeah. Okay.
Who's the last outfield?
Oh, Dawson. Right? Yeah.
Yep.
And then behind the plate, do you have Jody Reed?
I made
No,
it.
was Jody Davis.
Jody
was
fucking Davis.
no.
goddamn-
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Jody Davis was the catcher for the 84 Cubs. The catcher for the 89 Cubs
Oh, Berryhill.
was also a rookie of the year, I was going to say, wasn't he?
Damon
Or-
Berryhill.
Yeah.
He was.
Burial.
Yeah,
No,
he was like maybe. Yeah, I think he was a rookie of the year. Was he? I don't know.
Remember, he was projected catcher, then it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did pretty well. I
You
mean, I
pretty
got.
well. You had everybody except for the catcher.
All right, not bad. Gets.
Yeah.
I almost got
The
you.
one I
You
thought
did,
you
man.
would not
You
get
did.
was Vance. I thought you would not get Vance Law, and you whipped it right out.
Yeah, I saw Vance Law and I was like, yeah, I'll offer you $400 right now. and then you named him immediately and I started sweating.
For some reason, I thought I was thinking of Vance Law the other day, so that's where I think it came from. I think Vance is a pretty tough sounding name. It's a pretty badass name, Vance. Yeah, and I don't know.
Is that Damon Berryhill beat out Joe Girardi for a job that year?
Wow.
So Girardi would have been your reserve.
Yeah, Girardi was our reserve. He was 1 year younger than Damon Berryhill. Girardi would have been 24 in '89, and Berryhill was 25.
Mm-hmm. So aside from Dawson, a fairly young team, I mean, Rhino would have been in his prime.
Rhino was 29. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vance Law was 32,
Okay. So
and Dawson was 34.
yeah, it's a fun team, man. I remember that. I remember that team well. I do. I saw a game at Wrigley Field in '89. It was the first time I ever went there.
Nice.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Remember
Cool.
who it was against?
Cardinals.
Nice.
Yep. 89 and Cardinals. It was a June day, kind of rainy, kind of cold for June, but Chicago, kind of typical. Yeah, I do. I went
Dave
with my
says
cousin.
wind's coming in about 5 miles an hour out of the north.
Yeah. It was packed. I mean,
They
I'd
were
only been to
low on
White Sox
mustard that
games.
day.
Yeah, I'd only been to White Sox games at that point, so it was a foreign feeling to see a full ballpark. Like I was like, oh, all right.
What? I gotta sit in my seat?
Yeah,
I can't just go anywhere?
Yeah, the place was hopping. I'd been to maybe like 2 White Sox games prior to that. I was only like in 4th grade, so I hadn't seen a lot of professional baseball in person. It was probably only like my 3rd or 4th game total. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we went down to Busch that year. We would go to Busch a lot just because of the proximity.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
and we had a bunch of this is Cub Cardinal land here in Central Illinois. So it was like we would usually be going with other people, like my parents' friends, and so half of them were Cubs fans, half of them were Cardinal fans. So it was always funny going down there as like a big group because half of everybody would come back kind of pissed off.
Right. Yeah. I was watching the Ozark, the TV show with the first season, and they do. You don't really see the Cubs-Cards rivalry played out a lot in film or TV, and it's mentioned in Ozark. If you spoiler alert, so
Nice. Yeah, you're right. You don't see it. It's one of those flyover rivalries.
Yeah,
Flyover
definitely a
country
Midwestern
rivalry.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody just talks about Giants and Dodgers. Give me a break.
Right.
Yankees and Red Sox, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yankees and Red Sox on the coast. East Coast, West Coast bias. Anyway. Oh, Levi, I looked it up. The Padres and Cubs in LCS 1984. The Cubs were up 2-0 in a best of 5. So it was the equivalent of being up 3-0 in a best of 7. They won that first game like 13-1. The Cubs did.
Yeah.
So you were flying high.
Oh yeah. In '84, people were just like, literally, I have it in the other room. They thought they were going to the World Series. I have a 1984 Cubs World Series pennant.
Wow.
It says 1984 National League Champions, Chicago Cubs, and it has the whole roster name. It's called a ghost pennant.
Wow.
Yeah, like it should not exist, but they were made because the
I always
Cubs
wanted to see one of those
nothing.
things in person. Yeah.
Man, that's good. Nice.
Yeah, I have it framed, hanging in my room in my arcade.
I think you're gonna have to send us a photo.
Yeah, I can for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I will switch back to music, and one of my favorite moments in music was in October of 2012. Neil Young and Crazy Horse went on tour and played Tulsa, Oklahoma as one of the stops. And being in Kansas City, I knew this was a very good stop to go see Neil and Crazy Horse up close because it was going to be general admission in Tulsa, and I knew that there wouldn't be much of a challenge.
Were other shows on the tour general admission, or was
likely.
that just a Tulsa thing?
I think there were.
That's cool.
Shows, GA.
That's cool. You don't in this day and age you don't see a lot of that in arenas. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, it was short of arena. It was a convention center technically, I think. Yes, the Tulsa Convention Center, and so Betsy was game for waking up and just going to get in line outside the convention center like first thing. So we got in line around it was before noon for sure, and there was just one other couple in line. I forget if we were first or if they were first, and so yeah, we passed the day just hanging out there in line in Tulsa, and knowing it was Neil with Crazy Horse. I'd seen Neil before. I'd seen Neil with Crazy Horse before on the Greendale tour, but I hadn't ever seen Neil and Crazy Horse on a tour of, that wasn't just going to be Greendale in its entirety. It was going to be, a nice mix of Crazy Horse tunes. And so, the wait, whatever that was, 6-7 hours. It was a balmy day in Tulsa. And so there were phases, and this is one of the favorite things of just like going to a show. Even though the wait can be interminable, it's worth it. It's fun just to to build up to the moment when you're let inside, and it's part of it. It's part of the experience. And so finally, it was afternoon. After a few hours, we were let inside, and they let us wait within the convention center, which was nice because it was. It was air conditioned and you were comfortable, and there were vending machines but then there was a line split, and this got me a little nervous. There were separate entrances into the convention center, and you had to make a decision. Okay, were we going to go to this entrance A or entrance B? And so we just we went to entrance A, and that's where you wait for the next couple hours. But at the same time, somebody who showed up probably at 4 p.m. got it for his first in line at entrance B. So that, takes you off a little bit, but, whatever. Mm-hmm. So they open the doors and they start scanning tickets. And we hear the beeping going on in entrance B, but in entrance A, they're having a hard time scanning the tickets. And I'm like, son of a bitch.
You're like, fuck.
If this isn't fair, everybody stop. Nobody goes in until I go in. And anyway, they finally scan the ticket, and I just race down. You go down the lower bowl, and you go onto the floor. And fortunately, we were still front and center, hands on the gate, right in front of Neil's microphone. Fortunately, though, we didn't even realize that Los Lobos was the opener, so that was fun.
Awesome.
Killer opener, obviously.
That's always nice when the opener is a surprise and they're good too.
Yeah. And I don't recall having any idea that they were even opening. I didn't even think that there was an opener, and then they came out and played, and that was fun. Anyway, so the real one of the most memorable parts of the show was that Neil used his Rust Never Sleeps set for this tour, and the last time I saw this set was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and these are the oversized amplifiers and microphone, and awesome. I mean, they're gigantic, and they go over. They aren't functional, obviously. They just kind of go over the actual guitar amps, and up in the ceiling was the giant microphone, and there after Los Lobos plays, there's the mic and the rafters, and there's Neil's roadies are in lab coats, and they're just like going. They're walking to and fro on the stage, like miming arguments with iPads and things, like it was a play. And then they start to bring the microphone down, and it was a big to do. And they place the microphone, and everybody cheers. And granted, and this is all the lights are up. It's just roadies on stage doing all this stuff. And it was classic kind of campy Neil in that sense. And then, Neil and Crazy Horse come out and open with Love and Only Love. Then Powderfinger. This is the Psychedelic Pill Tour, which is a very good album. I think we referenced it in the last episode, Gabe, when you were talking about Neil. And they did Born in Ontario, Walk Like a Giant, which were killer tunes. Walk Like a Giant was maybe 15 minutes long. And then Neil did solo Needle and the Damage Done, and they did another new tune, Twisted Road, Singer Without a Song, Ramada Inn, which is a killer tune.
Ramada Inn's good too.
Yeah. And then they closed up with Cinnamon Girl, Fucking Up, Mr. Soul, and Hey Hey My My. The set was only and then encored with Tonight's the Night, and the keyboard came down for San Pedro for Pancho to play with the birds painted on the sides, and but just to be there, front and center, and this Neil's being partially eclipsed by this giant microphone stand which stayed out there the entire time, and just classic. He's hammering away on that Gibson, and it was vintage Crazy Horse. It could have been 1977. It could have been 1997. It was 2012, and it was a dream fulfilled to see Neil and Crazy Horse in such a setting, to be so close and just absorb it with all of your being. And Neil and Crazy Horse, Tulsa, Oklahoma, October 14th, 2012.
That sounds like a top fiver or a top tenner at least.
Yeah, you're right. I will probably regret not putting it higher. I might just talk about it again, actually, in my top 5.
You're up next.
All right. So we're at 58 minutes now. If you wanted to do another round,
it's up to you guys.
Yeah. What time is it? 10:30. Yeah. Fuck, I don't know. Yeah. Well, let's do one. Let's do one more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You're up.
Okay. Me. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna switch around a little bit. This isn't on my list, but I'm gonna move its position. We talked at the beginning of this show a lot about the availability of music and really having every song we've ever wanted at our fingertips. Baseball access has gotten cheaper and easier, and I'm grateful for that. I feel like, when I was talking about the consumer winning in the music world, it was a little bittersweet because, the artist doesn't quite get the artists don't get the record deals like they used to. And there's not the MTV and the radio and record stores like there used to be, and that sucks. But with baseball, I don't feel as bad about their product becoming cheaper, like because their salaries are going up, quite frankly. So I'm grateful for the fact that MLB Access, whether it's the radio or TV apps, is getting cheaper and easier. Score one for the consumer. What happened to music, TV, and movie consumption has now infiltrated sports. For $20 for the season, I can get any baseball game I want on the radio. I'm a baseball on the radio type of guy. Not that I don't like baseball on TV, but really the only baseball I ever watch on TV is like the World Series, or like the playoffs. Other than that, I don't watch baseball on TV. Even the White Sox, it's almost an exclusive radio experience for me. And when baseball does come back, I'm certainly going to miss Ed Farmer's voice. Rest in peace. I have to say, don't think I acknowledged that in an episode yet, but that was a big loss for me and White Sox fans. Rest in peace, Farmio. But there's nothing better to me than like sort of being on the couch and dozing off to like a late West Coast game. That's like my idea of paradise. Particularly if it's one that I don't have a lot of investment in, like give me like the A's and the Mariners like on a Wednesday night, and like, even my wife will joke like, like where are the White Sox playing? I'll be like, oh, they're in Oakland for the next 3 days. She's like, so you're going to be crawling into bed about 1 a.m. And right. I'm like, exactly. I'm like, if I even make it to the bed. Okay. So yeah. So this availability of baseball on the radio through apps, through MLB at Bat, or I use TuneIn. I've got the TuneIn kind of pro whatever, and I can actually get any sport on the radio, just about any professional sporting event on the radio.
Even today?
Through the TuneIn. Not right now. Not that. I guess I could get South Korea baseball has come back. But for a while there, it was a pretty golden experience. I say this since I did cancel the subscription the other day because I don't really have that much use for it right now. But then it had already charged me for like a year, like I did the yearly thing. So like I'm like, fuck, I'm stuck with it until February, But anyway, but yeah, this access to all the games on the radio for $20 for the season, man, that is a flippin' steal, dude.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can
either
listen to
feed, right?
Yeah, either
away.
feed.
Yeah,
if you want to practice your Spanish, like they've got Spanish station as well usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, either feed. So you can get different announcers, or different. Yeah, you can different play-by-play guys. So yeah, it's great, man. Like $20. I mean, like you can't say there's not a value there. I mean, that's insane. Yeah, you can get every baseball game on the radio for $20 for the whole season. Good work, MLB. Pat you on the back for that one.
No, it is.
Agreed.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Now we just got to get him to work on those blackout things.
Yeah.
Right.
But, right on, man. My last thing tonight is going to be an experience that Gabe was with me, and that was me fulfilling. Finally getting to see what I guess was the closest I ever got to see the original lineup of the Black Crowes. And that was in Chicago at the Riviera, October 30th and 31st of 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black Crowes so-called reunion tour, I guess, if you will. That's not really what they labeled it. What was it? I'm trying to remember what they called that tour, but I can't remember. Was it like a 20th anniversary tour, maybe, or something? Or
no, that came a few years later.
Yeah,
that was like 2010. Was it like All Join Hands? Something
might
like
have been that one. Yeah. So it was just as someone who they were like Gabe and I have talked about, they were kind of our lives for a few years there, the late 90s, early 2000s. It was such a fulfillment of, I don't know, I'm not going to say dream, but it was a fulfillment of wanting to really see that band, and had never gotten the opportunity because by the time I was into them, Mark was gone, Johnny Colt was gone. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have the opportunity to see them live. And so to see Mark Ford step out on the stage with a guitar and have Rich and Chris there, it was just like, it was just, and not just to mention that, like Ed too, man, and Steve, and just the whole thing. It was pretty magical. And those two shows were, I mean, if the Black Crowes ever played two shows to kind of appease their fans set list wise, it may have been those two shows.
I don't think there were any repeats between the two nights.
No, and it was maybe,
maybe Remedy, but that's about it.
Deep fan cuts and stuff.
Yeah, killer set list, man. Jesus.
Fuck yeah, dude. Levi, those are my favorite Crowes shows I've ever seen. Those are my favorites. Yeah, absolutely.
And then, not to mention, we got the whole bonus of it being Halloween the one night, and so we got to see the Black Crowes come out as BCDC.
Yeah,
they were all dressed in Angus outfits, which was strange. I thought it was like, I could see if like Rich and Mark wanted to have been in those outfits, but it was like all of the guys were in Angus outfits.
Yeah.
And so,
they did Highway to Hell. They did Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be and Rock and Roll Damnation.
Yep,
it was fucking awesome. That was the best, dude. I'm with you, man. That was.
I remember there was a costume contest, and it was like, all I remember was this like smoking hot Red Riding Hood with like a wolf guy.
That's my buddy, man. That's my buddy Don, man. Yeah. My friends won that. Yeah. They're not together anymore. No longer a couple, but yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think about
it. Yeah.
So yeah, man, that was a good 2 days.
Yeah, fuck yeah, man. That was as good as it got. I mean, the band seemed like in really good spirits too. Like the sort of, as Steve talks about in his book, things hadn't gotten totally weird yet. With the band getting back together. Right. Like it seems like that came a few months later in 2006. That was. Other than, the 92, 97 run, that was as good as it gets right there.
Oh, yeah, man. Mark Ford doing L.A.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, dude, like, I mean, like, that second night or third, maybe, I can't remember if it was the first or the second night, but they did, like in a row, they did Feathers, they did Title Song.
Set 2 is Dreams, Song of Love by Manassas, Title Song, L.A., Feathers.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good show.
Yeah. That's killer. Yeah, and you're right. It was called the All Join Hands Tour.
Okay.
It was it's something I'll always remember, that's for sure.
Why didn't you guys goad me into coming up, man?
Yeah, you should have came up for those, dude. That was the best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was pretty good, yeah.
The night before, too, the 30th was really good.
The 30th was excellent, too.
Both the set lists are excellent.
Yeah. I still listen to those shows. Like those are
we got the instant live while we were there.
Right.
We did the instant live and then promptly took it back to your house and ripped me and Dan a copy of it.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that was a interesting concept. They had going there. It was pre-nugs.net. So I remember it was road cases that they had put CD burners in. Yep.
And so it was like they wheeled in road cases, opened them up, plugged them all into like computers and power, and it was crazy. Yeah. It was like
and just a good vibe. I mean, all the diehards in line getting those discs, like it was like the fans that were there that night, like, it was a good crew. It was a real fucking deal, man. Yeah, that was everybody was jacked, man. When Mark came back, it changed everything. I mean, I remember when a few months earlier in that spring when Mark came back, they played those like little shows as Mr. Crow's Garden. They played like 4 or 5 shows, And I remember like, we were on a group text a bunch of us, and like, you know, a guy that we texted with was there, and like he was, you know, sending in like the songs as they played them. It was fucking real. Yeah. So yeah, man, I'm with you, Levi. Those are my favorite Crow shows.
Yeah,
Nice.
for sure, man.
Nice.
It's good stuff.
All right. Well, I'll close out the evening with another Georgia musician. So I believe I once dubbed Kevin Kenny the poet laureate of rock and roll Shin-Soo.
Nice. I still agree with that.
And I stand by it.
Here.
Yeah. You know, Kevin Kenny is, you know, first of all, he's a founding member and lead singer of Driving and Crying, for those who don't know, a rock and roll band formed in '85 in Atlanta, Georgia. And Kevin is a unique mix of punk, hippie, and blue-collar sympathizer. He'll write poetic stanzas with abstract symbolism, followed by lyrics about life's simple bummers like breaking your shoelace and being late for work. And that's my favorite thing about Kevin Kenny. His mind is just as likely to be in the clouds of social idealism as it is reflecting on the cold reality of the assembly line. Right. And his songs, you know, whether they're rooted in punk, rock, or folk, can fill an arena on a Saturday night, just as easily blend into the local chatter at a tavern down the street on a Tuesday. So while Kevin's greatest notoriety came in the late 80s and early 90s with songs like Straight to Hell and Fly Me Courageous, his output since stands up to his peers and remains timeless, in my opinion. So if you aren't familiar, I recommend starting with the Driving and Crying releases of Smoke and Wrapped in Sky, segue into Kevin's solo releases of The Flower and the Knife and my personal favorite, Broken Hearts and Auto Parts. While I don't listen to Kevin as much as I used to, I still take great comfort in knowing he is there waiting to offer his very robust and calming perspective whenever I need it, even during his regular broadcasts during the coronavirus isolation. So, Kevin Kenny, ladies and gentlemen, check him out.
Well put. Well stated. Suntangled Revival is awesome too.
Oh my God, yeah, I listened to that.
Did I forget it? Is it Suntangled Angel Revival? Did I miss a word in there?
Yeah, the Angels. Yeah.
It's got Dave Schools playing bass on that album.
Oh
nice.
Yeah, you're right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just listened. I have Mystery Road on vinyl. It's kind of one of my.
Sure.
It's not a white whale, but it's a tough record to find on vinyl, like an original copy of Mystery Road. Yeah. So I was just listening to it the other day, dude. I can listen to Honeysuckle Blue like 9 million times in a row, and I would be like, hit play again. Like, dude, that song gets me. It just gets to me. I don't know, man. I love that fucking song, and I don't know if it's like He's got a way with, like you said, the blue collar melancholiness type of a lyric.
Yeah.
And man, dude, it's just one of the greatest lines of all, man. Lost and found and lost again, buddy.
Right.
Yeah. I've been listening to a lot of them over the last couple of weeks, and it stands up, man. Like. It wasn't a phase that I went through, you know, from like 2005 to, or I should say from like 2002 to 2012. It still gets me every time I listen to it. And
I feel like he and Todd Snyder are kind of carrying on the John Prine torch, you know, a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, real quick, and we'll be out. One of my favorite Kevin Kenny moments was I saw him play solo at just this dive in Kansas City, and I went there early, and it was during the NCAA tournament back when they played sports, and he was sitting at the bar playing like video poker, just drinking PBRs like before it was ironic.
Right.
and watching the NCAA basketball games, and so I went up and sat next to him, and he said, what do you want to hear? And I said, if you could play Time, that would be great. And Time being one of his newer cuts, and so his entire set was solo, I believe, except for Time, at which point he had to bring out Sarah Lee Guthrie's drummer to play percussion because Time has this metronome like percussion on it. And other than that, his entire set was solo except for the song I requested. He had
That's
to
awesome.
get some reinforcements. So
That's
I
awesome,
was
dude.
very appreciative of that.
Nice.
Dude, sometimes those
Yeah.
shows in those little clubs like that can just be the best, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
there weren't 50 people there.
Dude, I had an experience like that in St. Louis probably about 10 years ago with, of all people, Michael Monroe from Hanoi Rocks.
Huh.
And
He's awesome, dude. Yeah, go ahead though.
he
Sorry.
played this little dive bar in St. Louis, and like I bet there wasn't, like Jonathan said, 40, 50 people tops. And dude, he fucking rocked. And he was so cool. He came like just down and was talking to everybody, signing autographs, and just what's so great was we were standing out front when he pulled up. He pulled up in a hotel van, like, you know, like the Crown Plaza shuttle van or whatever.
Mhm.
And so he got out, and at first I thought it was a girl because he still teases his hair. And
Right.
his hair is like still huge. And then a girl who looked just like him got out with him. It was like his date. It was like this girl with huge hair.
That's great.
Oh, classic.
Yeah.
He bust out the saxophone.
Oh, dude, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
the guy could play a sax. Yeah.
I on that note, Levi, I heard a DJ. They played him on, God, maybe Underground Garage on Sirius.
Okay.
And they played either a Hanoi Rocks tune or a Michael Monroe tune. I can't remember. And the DJ was kind of describing them as you did, Michael. And he's like, there's a guy that just has kept it real his whole career. He's like, I don't care if I'm fucking broke. I'm just gonna fucking look like this forever and stay skinny and fucking, you know, like.
Oh yeah, dude, he looked like straight off
like,
of an album cover, like from back in the day.
Like
still had eyeliner on, still, you know, it was just, he was rocking
real
fucking
deal.
roll, dude.
Yeah.
Right on.
And I'm doing a poor job of paraphrasing, but this DJ really, and your story there, just really captured his essence, because that guy's the real deal.
A lot of people were predicting them to be huge, and then Raz, the drummer, died obviously in the car crash with Vince Neil, and then boom, band was done.
Vince Neil seems like a really terrible person. I'm gonna be honest. Vince Neil seems like, because like Vince Neil was like got DUIs after that too. Motherfucker, you can't call a cab, really?
Yeah.
You know, seriously. Yeah. Vince Neil seems like a real piece of shit from what I gather. But anyway, it's just me. There goes Vince. Not getting Vince on the show.
We just lost our crew followers.
In that fight that was brewing in the 80s, I would have taken Axel anyway.
We want the Hanoi followers anyway.
Yeah, that's right. They were. You can argue that they were like the crew that didn't get as big. You know, like the potential was there. Yeah, you can even argue like they're a fucking better band, quite frankly.
A lot of people, like I said, because they had a little bit more. If you look, they had more musical talent than Motley Crue. Especially with him, I mean, a guy with blown out hair rocking a saxophone in a band and like that in the 80s, that was so unique. You know what I mean?
Dude, they were like an 80s New York Dolls, you know? I mean, because like the New York Dolls kind of had that bop too. You know what I mean? Like the New York Dolls were kind of like 1950s revivalist almost, you know? And like Hanoi Rocks carried some of that. And then, you know, some of the other bands that came after them, like Poison and stuff, you know, they kind of moved away from that, and obviously, you know, it sounded more synthetic. But yeah, no, they're Hanoi Rocks kicks ass, man.
All right, I'll spend some tomorrow.
Stuff, guys.
Yeah. All righty, boys. Well, I always feel much better after I rap with these cats, and I hope you enjoyed listening to us as well. Check us out on rockchew.com. Got the whole archives there, as well as other fun stuff. Follow us on the Instagram and the Twitter at RockInChew. And also, check us out on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Tell all your friends. And we will keep this countdown going during our next episode. And we'll talk to you soon. Hang in there. Hopefully we'll all get through this together and everybody gets out on the other side. All right. Stay safe. Stay healthy. We'll see ya. What's that? What's
my
that?
motorcycle's here.
Gabe says, my ride's here, I'm out.